Thank you for downloading this Brum Radio podcast. For more podcasts, visit brumradio.com.
And now, for your listening pleasure, it's the Brum Picture Show, brought to you by Brum Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Brum Picture Show, the film show brought to you by Birmingham-based community cinema collective Screen B14. On this week's show, we're celebrating International Women's History Month, and we're going to be talking about our favourite women behind the camera. That's right, we're dedicating the whole episode to talking about our favourite female B-camera operators. Woo!
Oh, I thought it was going to be about me. I thought the whole episode was celebrating me and my life's work.
And welcome to the Nadine O'Mahony episode. Yes, that's right. I'm joined, as always, on the show by a woman. And a woman who has been allowed to make some films, no less.
Yes, I had to ask permission, but I got the thumbs up.
Yep.
So.
The men said, all right, we'll let you make a couple of films. Then. So I would say Nadine is quite qualified to speak on this subject, and also she's a bit Irish, and we're recording this on St. Patrick's Day. Digbeth High Street is a mock with people falling over and generally wearing silly outfits in the name of St. Patrick.
Yeah, 50% Irish.
Yeah.
That's a lot of a percent.
Significantly Irish. So yes, how are you today, Nadine?
Not drunk.
Oh.
A bit tired.
Oh.
Not feeling especially Irish. Maybe I'll go and watch Kneecap when I get home.
And have a cup and tea.
Cup and tea.
Cup and tea.
Agaspania.
Oh, very good. Well, thanks for joining me, as always, Nadine. So, yes, this is going to be a girl power episode. We're going to be talking about ladies, lady directors, lady filmmakers.
Let's not refer to them as that, though.
What, ladies?
As lady directors.
What are we supposed to refer to them as?
Directors.
Directors.
Directrix.
All right.
On
this week's show, we're going to be talking about directors.
Yeah, they're just going to all happen to be women. That's the future. That's the woke future I'm living for.
So woke, Nadine, aren't you? But yes, so a very exciting episode coming up indeed. But first of all, it is time for the news section. So has anything caught your eye in the news this week, Nadine?
Yes.
Good.
A man will be hosting the Oscars in 2026.
Oh, yes. That's right. Conan O'Brien. They loved him so much. They've locked him in already. Is this normal? Do they usually announce the Oscars presenters so early?
It feels incredibly early.
Yeah.
It does feel very... It's like it just happened. It just happened.
Yeah. And who knows what Conan O'Brien's going to do in the next year. He might do all sorts of terrible things.
Oh, don't say that.
No.
Better get a woman.
Get a woman
just in case. No, I really enjoyed his presentation of the Oscars. I was surprised he hadn't done it before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to see him back.
Me too.
Nice to see a white man on television, so rare these days.
Yes, but he's a ginger white man, so kind of a minority. Yeah.
And he's Irish.
There we go.
It's very St. Patrick's there for you.
So yeah, I'm excited about that. But I think that's about all there is to say on the matter, isn't it? Conan O'Brien is coming back to do the Oscars.
Yeah.
But what will he sing about this time?
We'll find out in 2026, won't we?
Can't wait.
Some good news.
Good news!
Cinema box office takings are up. So, since the pandemic, the industry has been hit quite badly, but the BBC reported recently that there's actually been a boom in independent cinema tickets for under 25s. They're saying it's probably letterboxed. And that with Bridget Jones, they're 20% up on last year. So it's been pretty steady. So, yeah, admissions are up. And it's been a pleasant surprise for cinemas.
Yes, that is a pleasant surprise. And you mentioned Bridget Jones 4.
Yeah.
Was it Bridget Jones 4?
Bridget Jones something.
Bridget Jones something, the new Bridget Jones film. And I read an article about the box office success of said film, and it was contextualized in a very interesting way. I don't know if you've seen this article, but apparently the Bridget Jones franchise if you will, has collectively outgrossed all 13 movies in the popular slasher franchise Halloween, which seems quite an arbitrary comparison to make, but nevertheless, I guess they're making some kind of point in that 4 films is fewer than 13 films.
Yeah.
And therefore, that's better.
Why do you think we aren't celebrating Bridget Jones as this box office phenomenon then?
Well, this article is. And,
yeah, but you don't hear it as often as you hear Halloween, do you?
No, it's not. Well, come Bridget Jones 13, then people are going to be really excited about it. But yes, that is a good question. I mean, people are talking about it.
Well, it goes to show you that, films with women in lead roles, there's a market for that.
Yeah, that's true. But as long as it's directed by a man, which Bridget Jones 4 is.
But it was based on a book written by a woman.
That's true.
So, snap.
But yes, and it's also apparently well on its way to outgrossing 2 Twisters movies. I don't know what point they're trying to make with that, because that's fewer films.
Well, I think it just goes to show that, the much maligned chick flick is at box office gold.
Yeah.
And maybe Hollywood ought to take notice.
Maybe they ought to, because yes, you don't get so many films of that ilk anymore. I must admit, I've no intention of seeing Bridget Jones 4. Have you?
No.
Why is that, Nadine?
Just don't particularly like Bridget Jones.
Okay.
But I like other chick flicks.
Yeah.
Dirty Dancing, Pretty Woman, all that kind of jazz.
Yeah. Good for Bridget Jones, I guess.
Good for UK.
Good for the UK.
Good for cinemas.
Hooray!
Good for all of us.
Hooray! Any other news, Nadine? No? That's it. Okay.
That's all the news.
Good stuff. Well, yes, I had a little look through the news. I thought I'd try and make it kind of related to our subject, women in film.
Yeah.
So Kristen Stewart, she's going to have her directorial debut.
Finally.
At the Cannes Film Festival. It's going to be called The Chronology of Water, and it's starring Imogen Poots, and it is adapted from Lydia Yuknavich's 2011 best-selling memoir. And that's all the information I have on that. Some other interesting news, which kind of fascinates me, the prospect of this. So, Bridgerton?
Yes.
It's got a woman in it, called Phoebe Dynevor, and she has landed her next lead film role. And do you know what it is? It is M. Night Shyamalan's upcoming new project, which was written, or going to be written, by, of all people, Nicholas Sparks. Didn't he write
author.
The author. The cheesy rom-com author. The romantic author, Nicholas Sparks. For those who don't know, he wrote like The Notebook and stuff like that.
He wrote The Notebook.
Yeah, A Walk to Remember. I don't know about that one. The Longest Ride, The Best of Me. It's like Dear John. All these kind of, Hallmark card, romantic novels. He's published 23 novels. But going to be collabing with M. Night. So he's apparently going to be working on a screenplay and a novel to tie in with the film at the same time. And that is going to be M. Night Shyamalan's next film. Isn't that bonkers?
Is it going to be a mystery?
It's going to be a supernatural romantic thriller.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, and it's going to have Jake Gyllenhaal in it as well.
Ooh.
Slapping a fish.
I might watch that.
Yeah, so there you go. I'm looking forward to that. But yes, Phoebe Dynevor has been talking about that, but also making some serious points. Do you want to hear some serious points that she's been making? I
can't wait.
She's been speaking about the lack of roles for young women in the industry, in terms of acting specifically. And she says, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but there's still not that many parts going. It's a really good time for older women, which is amazing. And there's a lot for young men, but not a lot for the actresses that I know in my age bracket. What do you think of this, Nadine?
I don't have any statistics to back her up, but I would have said that generally the thought is that, older women I think just women across the board just don't have meaty enough roles, really. And I think hopefully that's something that will change if we have more women behind the camera and more women screenwriters.
Yeah.
So she probably has a point, but I can't back that up with statistics that young women are more maligned than older women. I think it is probably across the board not great.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess it is interesting that we have seen more success with older women. But I guess it's because, like, I don't know, you had more stars in the olden times, didn't you? So so there's more like aging movie stars who've still got that kind of name clout,
charisma.
Like your Nicole Kidmans and your Demi and all that, and your Cate Blanchett.
I noticed as well, because I don't have Netflix myself. I was just scrolling through it the other day, and there were a lot of big female movie stars like Julia Roberts and Nicole Kidman popping up on Netflix. Yeah. So, there's a second life there on the streamers as well.
Yeah. So there you go. But yes, I thought that was interesting. Some unusual news and a serious point. So there we go. Some other vaguely gendered news.
Okay.
Have you heard what Jason Isaacs has been saying?
Who's Jason Isaacs? The singer?
The actor. Jason, Death of Stalin and...
Harry Potter?
Harry Potter, yeah. Loads of stuff.
Yes, I know who he is.
Well, he's been in this thing, a TV show apparently, called The White Lotus. I don't know about that. But apparently in it, he has a prosthetic penis, yeah?
Okay.
And Jason Isaacs has said that he is tired of being asked about his prosthetic penis. And he says, what is the obsession with penises?
That's what we'll be asking all throughout this episode.
Exactly. That's why I thought this was appropriate, because he thinks that there's a bit of a double standard going on. So he says, the best actress this year is Mikey Madison at the Oscars, and I don't see anybody discussing her vulva, which was on screen all the time. I think it's interesting that there's a double standard for men, but when women are naked, Margaret Qualley as well, in The Substance, nobody would dream about talking about her genitals or her nipples or any of those things. So it's odd that there's a double standard. I think it would be odd when there are characters, and some of the women are naked in here, you would never dream of discussing their genitalia, not for a second. Now, this has led to a bit of a kickback online, and people have been asking what on earth he's trying to say with this point. And he's received a little bit of stick.
Okay.
For his comments about penises. And I don't know, because I do take issue with some of that, because I would argue that people did discuss Margaret Qualley's breasts and whatnot in The Substance.
Because they were prosthetic.
Exactly.
As well.
Specifically because they are prosthetic. So I would argue that actually people just tend to gravitate towards talking about prosthetic genitalia. So, of course, Nosferatu's prosthetic penis. Yeah. In Nosferatu, that was talked about quite a lot.
People were talking about Barry Keoghan in Saltburn.
Well, that's another point, because that was not a prosthetic penis as far as we know.
But people were speculating.
But people were speculating. So maybe he does have a point, and maybe that was, this is a bit of kickback, to the amount Barry Keoghan's real penis was discussed, like on red carpet ceremonies and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, and maybe you could argue that a female star wouldn't have attracted the same level of scrutiny that Barry Keoghan's penis did. But I don't know, maybe this is a reaction to decades of women being objectified on screen, and now it's men's turn.
Yeah.
Is that what you reckon?
I have no idea, to be honest. I think maybe it's just considered more like something to brag about. Do you know what I mean? If you're a man and you're on screen, and you have a penis worth talking about, but do you know what I mean? That's considered more positive. Whereas to talk about a woman's bits, might be seen more derogatory. Like women aren't allowed to go around going like, yeah, I've got great boobs. Not unless they're like...
I'd say they are allowed.
I haven't finished my sentence, Paul. And taken seriously. Do you know what I mean? Like you're sort of put... I mean, look at Pamela Anderson is a perfect example of somebody who, did glamour modelling, was a Playboy model, was much discussed for her body and her shape and all of that, but wasn't taken seriously as an actress and felt she wasn't able to really give what she could have give until recently when she had the chance in The Showgirl by Gia Coppola. So, I think women are judged on their bodies and it is discussed, but it's in a negative way, maybe.
So, I don't know. Jason Isaacs, please email us in to clarify your thoughts. Yeah.
At picture show at brumradio.com.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there we go. Will that do?
Yes,
Okay.
that'll do, Pig.
You are listening to the Brum Picture Show on Brum Radio, and today we are talking about women in film to celebrate International Women's History Month. So, let's talk a bit of history, shall we? Nadine, talk to me.
What I think is really interesting is when you look at the early history of film, there are loads and loads of women, and there are lots of people of colour, and it's actually loads of people are just out there making stuff. I think in a similar way to how we've got so many content creators now, YouTube and TikTok and all of those channels where it's kind of unregulated and it's sort of free for all, and
no gatekeepers.
Yeah, there's few gatekeepers and people can just go out and make stuff. So, you know, the earliest known female filmmaker was Alice Blachet, French born. She moved to America sometime later. She directed over 600 short films.
Oof.
To put that in context, I've been making films since 2015. I've made under 20.
Yeah.
So 600 is a lot.
Lazy.
Lois Weber directed between 100 and 400 films.
Ooh.
And Universal released about 200 films directed by women in the 1910s. There were women of colour making films as well, women like Eloise King Patrick Gist, Zora Neale Hurston, Tressie Soders, Maria P. Williams, Madame E. Toussaint, women that were making comedies, women that were making action, women that were making documentaries. So the earliest days of film, the silent era, there were lots of women. So what happened?
What did happen?
What happened? Well, the studios became bigger entities. And they started taking over from the independent filmmakers. There were guilds and organisations being formed, and the barrier to entry was being raised. And you could say whether that was an intentional way to keep women out or if it was just, a byproduct of these things happening. But men, money was being made basically. And sort of the big entities came in and sort of shut the little guys out. But it's interesting. Editing was once considered a woman's job.
Yes.
There were many, many female editors. It was considered sort of beneath men. In animation, there were a lot of women, especially in the sort of paint and ink department in Disney. Walt Disney himself actually said that the girl artists have a right to expect the same chances for advancement as men, and I honestly believe they may eventually contribute something to this business that men never would or could. So he did try to champion women, and Betty Davis said that women owned Hollywood for 20 years. Unfortunately, there was a period where there was literally like 2 women making films in Hollywood. I think Dorothy Arzner was like the only female director working from 1927 to 1943 in Hollywood. I think there was one other. Ida Lupino, she was a British actress, moved to America. She directed a number of films. But, coming from the silent era where we had loads of women making hundreds of films, coming into the golden era of Hollywood where you're literally having like 1 or 2 women, directing films. So we see a huge decline. There were more films about women in the war period. Men went off to war. Women's pictures became popular. There were female screenwriters. June Mathis wrote over 100 screenplays during the silent era. And by 35 years old, she was the first female executive at MGM.
Ooh.
She was also the highest paid executive in all of Hollywood.
Oh.
But yeah, it's a shame that things didn't carry on like that. I mean, in the 70s, there was a bit of a boom of women filmmakers. But I think we've not really clawed back the progress we made in those early years. So I'm just looking at some of the latest stats. indie women behind the scenes employment of women in US independent film. So in indie film, we have about 45% writers and directors of documentaries are women. So that's actually quite high. But when you look at roles like cinematographers, it's like 2% of cinematographers are women. So there's some very gendered, like, having said that, there's areas like costume design, which are obviously, I say obviously, but are considered, women's sort of roles and hair and makeup. But there's a lot of jobs, technical jobs especially, jobs that sort of have the most power are lacking female representation. Did you do any research?
Yes. Yeah, I did a little bit of research. So, of course, there's only ever been 3 female directors to win Best Director. So, Nadine, quiz.
Catherine Bigelow.
Yes.
Chloe Zhao.
Yeah.
It's not Sophia Coppola.
No, amazingly.
I know.
It's quite recently.
Recent.
And it was the first film she'd made in about 12 years, I think.
Jane Campion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. But yeah, that's mad, isn't it? And this is in 100 years.
Yeah.
In 100 years, 10 female directors have been nominated and only 3 have won. It's amazing to think about.
There was a moment a few years ago where I think it was at the Golden Globes, Natalie Portman was announcing the nominees, and she says, "And here are the all-male nominees."
Yeah.
And I thought that was a good moment.
Yeah, burn. And I found some other statistics. So apparently in 2023, women accounted for 14.7% of directors of top grossing films in the US. And also apparently for the top 250 US films in 2022, women comprised 24% of directors, writers, producers, editors, and cinematographers combined.
Wow.
Down 1% from 2021. So it's getting worse.
I think that's important to note because, like I said, if we look at the early days of Hollywood, there were loads of women. And even if we look at sort of the 40s, when women were being encouraged into work because of World War II, we really haven't made any gains since then. It's crazy because we think, society as a whole, we think has moved on, feminism and all the sort of gains we've made from that. And actually in film, it's been pretty static. I think, we've had movements like Time's Up, which was about, equality in pay for women. And there have been, a few women have come out and said they're male co-stars. I think Sienna Miller came out and said that Chadwick Boseman took a pay cut so she could get equal pay. So that, there's... you think, oh, that's a good thing, we're making progress. We've had Me Too, lots of, prominent men being called out on their abusive behaviour, to men and women. But unfortunately, the dial hasn't moved that much.
No. And of course, there's also a myth that, female-led films are less profitable, but this just isn't true. So there was a study done that when women and men filmmakers have similar budgets, their box office returns are comparable. So
there you go.
So yeah, films with female protagonists earned similar grosses to those with male leads. And so what are you talking about, people?
Exactly. So I think that's a really good point because I think women and people of colour have often had to try and do more with less. And so they're sort of set up to fail then. Do you know what I mean? Because if you're, you're not being invested in, and so the films aren't able to compete on the same level as those big budget films. And if they are a success like Mamma Mia or Bridget Jones, it's considered some kind of anomaly. And it's not like we see a spate of films in that vein since then. Hopefully Barbie making $1 billion at the box office has shown that films by women with women in lead roles, are perfectly viable, that there is an audience there. There are women who are perfectly capable of making these films. I think another challenge that women have is if they don't hit big on their first film, they're not given a second chance in the way that lots of male directors have had 2 or 3 or 4 chances to get a result. So
exactly.
Keep supporting women. Keep going to see films by women.
Yeah. Actually, I've got some. Do you want to hear some interesting stories about old Hollywood / silent film directors,
Go on.
female directors?
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier Alice Guy Blaché, who made the first film directed by a woman, supposedly, in 1896, La Fée aux Choux, which is interestingly about
A cabbage?
a cabbage. It's a whimsical tale featuring a fairy producing babies from cabbages. As you do. It's a lost film, but apparently it featured a honeymoon couple, a farmer, pictures of babies glued to cardboard, and one live baby. So that's nice. But yes, there is a tale of shooting her film The Birth, the Life, and the Death of Christ in 1906, and she cast a troupe of dancers as Roman soldiers, and mid-scene they broke into an impromptu jig, turning a solemn crucifixion into a chaotic dance-off. And then, unfazed, Alice apparently said, "Keep rolling, this might work." And it didn't. But her crew couldn't stop laughing. So that's a nice tale.
Sounds like me on set.
Yeah.
Keep rolling. It might work.
It'll be fine. And then we have... So Dorothy Arzner in 1927 was directing a film called The Wild Party. And she showed up on set in trousers.
Shock.
A bold move.
Was that illegal at the time?
It was certainly shocking. Whether it was illegal, I don't know. But apparently a producer then moaned, "Women don't wear pants." And she quipped, "They do when they're running this show." And the crew cheered. And she kept the trousers, proving who was really in charge.
Is that where the phrase comes from?
Yeah.
Who wears the trousers?
Exactly. That is the origin of that. And this isn't silent era, but it's a story about a cat and a woman.
Okay.
Do you want to hear this? So French legend Agnes Varda was filming Cleo from 5 to 7 in 1962 when her cat, Juju, sauntered into a shot, plopped down and stared at the camera. Instead of cutting, Varda cooed, "You're hired," and left it in. Varda later joked it was her toughest co-star to direct. So there you go.
There you go.
That's some nice stories about trailblazing women in film.
Yeah.
Do you like that?
Yeah, some fun ones there, definitely.
Yeah, good. That'll do. You are listening to the Brum Picture Show on Brum Radio, and this week we are talking about women in film, and specifically now our favourite female directors. So Nadine, you like female directors, don't you?
I like all sorts of directors.
Yes.
And some of them happen to be women.
Yeah.
No, let's really celebrate. I think I think I mentioned this on the show before, but I took part in this challenge one year where you had to watch a film by a female director every week.
Ooh.
It was called 52 Films by Women. And the first year that I tried this, I gave up because I just couldn't find enough films by women on the streamers.
Oh, wow.
And I was rewatching a lot of films like, Look Who's Talking and stuff like that, because just to try and, like, films that I'd already seen, just to sort of watch something directed by a woman and short films and all of that. But then the second time that I tried it, a year or two later, I actually succeeded. Now I don't have a target of how many films that I watch by women, but I've found it so much easier just to find films by women on streaming services, at the cinema. So I don't know whether it's not necessarily that there are more films by women, but I feel like the films that are made by women are more accessible and that I'm hearing about them and they're getting into festivals and things like that. So I think that's a good thing, a positive thing. So it's really exciting. I think what's exciting as well is the range of films made by women. So I feel like in the past, like I mentioned Look Who's Talking, like women seem to do very well in comedy, especially in the 80s and 90s. So you had Amy Heckerling and Nora Ephron and women like that. Making films, Wayne's World was directed by a woman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But you didn't get so many women making sort of action films and genre films and different kinds of films. And I think that's opening up a bit more now. Just thinking over the past year, there's been a lot of films by South Asian women, which I think is fantastic, that have done really well in festivals. So we've got films like Santosh, La Pata Ladies, All We Imagine As Light. Have done really well. So that's Payal Kapadia, Sandhya Suri, Kiran Rao. So I think that's really exciting because there's a whole world. I mean, we were talking about Hollywood and the West, but there's a whole world of female filmmakers out there waiting to be discovered. I didn't have an end to that sentence.
Okay. So yes, there is a range. But as you were saying that women were more associated with comedy and not so much action and stuff. But of course, we do have Catherine Bigelow, who's probably one of the most famous and maybe one of the most prolific, even though she's not made hundreds of films. She's still made a lot of films and is considered one of the giants of female filmmaking. She obviously gave us Near Dark and Point Break, and then got really big with The Hurt Locker, which was amusing because she won the Oscar for that, and she was the first, wasn't she? Yeah. And she beat her former husband, James Cameron, which must have been fun for him.
I'm sure he was very supportive.
Yeah. So we do have Catherine Bigelow.
Yeah, that's it. One.
Yeah, one. And then, but then also we have, this is an interesting example because you were saying earlier about how a lot of women, if their first film isn't a major success, then that's it, see you later. But Patty Jenkins, that's an interesting career because she makes an amazing masterpiece pretty much in 2003, Monster, with Charlize Theron, about Arlene Wuornos.
Charlene won the Oscar.
Yeah. And then she didn't make another film until 2017, 14 years later. And that film was a Wonder Woman of all things. People like that one. And then she made another Wonder Woman film. People didn't like that one. And that's it.
I haven't heard from her since.
Haven't heard from her since. So it's amazing, these female directors who literally have just got a few films on their CV where you'd think that they'd have loads. Like Mary Harron, for instance, director of American Psycho, which was a really well-regarded, you'd probably say modern classic now.
Yeah.
You'd expect that to lead to a very prolific career, but she's made 6 films in 30 years, one of which was Charlie Says a few years ago with Matt Smith as Charlie Manson. But yeah, it's just mad. You think, but it's like, what, 6 films, 30 years? What's going on? I mean, of course, it is the case for a lot of male directors as well. If you're outside of the mainstream, it can be very difficult to get funding. I mean, David Lynch couldn't even get funding towards the end of his life. But yeah, that's an interesting one. Interestingly, do you know who she dated, Mary Harron?
No.
Tony Blair.
What?
Yeah, according to Wikipedia, anyway.
That's so random.
It is random.
I have to keep reminding myself that Sofia Coppola and Tarantino were a couple.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's like not that we should be judging women by the famous men that they date.
No, but it is interesting.
But it's true what you say. It's, Screen B14 has shown a film by a Black American filmmaker, Leslie Harris, Just Another Girl on the IRT. We'll be showing that at the Mockingbird in April. Leslie Harris didn't make another film after that. And it's such a vibrant, fun, exciting film. And it's kind of crazy, like, why not? Why couldn't they get anything else funded?
No, exactly. And Antonia Bird is another example. She made 4 films in the 90s, like Priest and Mad Love, Face. And Ravenous, which is one of my favourite films. And then she just mainly worked in TV until her death in 2013. And, she was working still, but it's like, could have had a few more great films out of her. But I guess, I don't know. I think Ravenous wasn't the most harmonious production because she came on as a replacement for the original director, and then I don't know, it was seen of a bit of a mess of a production in general, but it was a great film as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, so many female directors, I think a few films and that's it.
I think it's interesting what you said as well about moving into television. Got I don't know if it's Janiska Bravo. So the director of Zola.
Oh, yeah,
What has she done since that? Well, she did The Listeners recently. on BBC, starring Rebecca Hall. She also did a few episodes of Mrs. America. These are all TV shows, and she's not the only one. There's a lot of other women out there who sort of have started off in film and sort of, shifted into TV. Maybe it's a better environment for women. Maybe there are more opportunities for them in the TV world, but it is a shame. We've got some amazing filmmakers like Raynan Miller, A.V. Rockwell, we want to see more films by them. We don't want to see them just, pivot into television. I think it's interesting what you're saying actually about women not doing as many films, because as people know, we often choose topics on this show, and we've chosen a lot of male directors. I think one of the reasons we haven't covered a female director, especially when we had Rory and we each used to pick a film, it was hard to find...
Sorry, who?
It was hard to find somebody who had 3 or more films that we'd all seen.
Yeah.
So I think, there are a few women who are quite prolific, but actually on the whole, it's maybe one and done.
Yeah. But then we do have some relative newcomers who it's looking like they will continue to be allowed to make films. Obviously, you mentioned Greta Gerwig, who, really succeeded with Barbie and everything, going from, nice small indie film with Lady Bird to a box office behemoth. And of course, behind her is another powerful woman behind the camera, Margot Robbie, who's surely got a directorial debut on the horizon. I don't know, or maybe she's just more interested in producing. And then we've also got Emerald Fennell, I guess, who has made a couple of films in a few years.
Yeah, she's got a third one coming up. She's doing Wuthering Heights.
Yeah, so there we go. So maybe we're going to start seeing some female filmmakers have fuller filmographies. So who knows?
It's interesting. It's a lot to speculate why don't women make as many films? Is it because they're not giving the opportunities? A lot of women, I think, have left the industry because they find it an unpleasant place to work. A lot of people, but a lot of women especially. I've been approached as a director a number of times by actresses who are producing projects because they want all-female crews. And I think there's a feeling that an all-female crew will be a safer set. It'll be a more collaborative environment. As a director, I've not had a lot of negative experiences myself in the industry as a short film director, but I'm coming in at the top level, do you know what I mean? And the couple of times that I have worked, in entry-level roles, I did a few days on Peaky Blinders. I wasn't poorly treated on that, but it's a completely different experience. It's completely different having all the power. Everybody's nice to you. Everybody wants to listen to you. Coming in at the bottom, I've heard some real horror stories. So I think hopefully if we invite more women in and we support them whilst they're there, we'll make the industry a better place. I think something interesting is the hours that people work are crazy in the film industry, and that's just the norm. But I'm hearing more about something called French hours, which is shorter days. And I've actually heard that it's cheaper to do shorter days, but more of them because you're not paying people overtime. And it's actually safer because, if you're working all day on set and then you have to drive back to your hotel or wherever you're staying, it's actually really dangerous, and it's a big problem in the industry. People just working to exhaustion, getting into car accidents, all sorts of safety issues. So I think maybe if we make the sets a safer, more inclusive environment, hours that are more reasonable, that might also, women who often have caring responsibilities, it might be more attractive and it might be a better environment for them, and it might encourage more women to, stick around and stay in the industry. And be better for everyone. Who wouldn't want to work shorter days?
Exactly. But yes, hopefully we are seeing change in the industry for the better.
Yeah, but I think it's important to keep talking about it. I know people think, oh, we've had this conversation. You know, Chloe Zhao's won an Oscar now. Coralie Faget was nominated.
Let's
it's all
move
sorted.
on.
Yeah, Barbie made $1 billion. But like we've said, if you actually look at the statistics and look at them every year, the needle isn't moving. And if we don't keep banging on about it, it's just going to backslide. So I think we really have to keep talking about this and, you know, more representation, you know, real equality.
That's right. Do feel free to send us your thoughts.
Yeah, who are your favourite female filmmakers? Picture show at brumradio.com.
That's right. And indeed, favourite female cinematographers.
Yeah, editors.
Yeah.
Thelma Schumacher
Yeah, exactly.
is just one of many.
One of many. So yes, there we go. Women in film. Girl power.
Don't say that.
Okay. Lady power.
No,
Woman power.
that's better.
Okay. You are listening to the Brum Picture Show on Brum Radio, and now it is the reviews section, and it is time to review Mickey 17, one of the most anticipated films on the Brum Picture Show. It was disgraced former presenter Rory's most anticipated film of 2024 and 2025. And, well, no spoilers, but I'm going to say it's probably set to be one of his biggest disappointments of 2025 based on his reaction after the film. Because, yes, Rory came back from Hollywood briefly, and we went to the cinema. He survived that shootout that you may remember from a couple of weeks ago, and we went to the cinema together to see Mickey 17. So yes, it's the long-awaited new film from the director of Parasite and of course Memories of Murder and Okja and of course The Host. And yeah, this is very much in the Okja camp of things, I suppose. So it's kind of a sci-fi black comedy thing. So it follows Robert Pattinson as Mickey, who signs up to be an expendable in this.
Not the Sylvester Stallone type.
No, and I feel like maybe they should have changed the name. Like, I mean, I get it. You know, he is literally expendable because basically it's a program. There's some sci-fi future where they're all, you know, colonizing other planets and stuff. And there is a concept of an expendable who is someone that you basically make a clone of and you experiment on them and kill them repeatedly. And then you just reprint them with all the memories intact. So the basic premise of it, there's all these different Mickeys, they die, there's a new Mickey. And when Mickey number 17 accidentally survives, he winds up coexisting with the new print of his, which is called a multiple. And it is Mickey 18. Hijinks ensue, as do philosophical conversations about the nature of identity. Who is the real Mickey? What is Mickey? So yeah, and it's a great concept. It's basically a high concept screwball black comedy, and it's based on a book called Mickey 7. There's only 7, and then Bong Joon-Ho was like, no, we need more Mickeys.
Yes, I need to kill Robert Pattinson more times.
Exactly. And it does sound great on paper. It is a good concept. And you know, it's got a great cast. We've got Toni Collette in there. And then we got Mark Ruffalo, once again, really enjoying hamming it up as some kind of Trump-like figure, eccentric chap. And we've even got Tim Key popping up in there, which is great, as the Pigeon Man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Tim Key's a brilliant British surrealist comedian. And there's quite a few British actors in here. And I do wonder whether this comes from working with John Ronson, because John Ronson, of course, writer of The Psychopath Test and Men Who Stare at Goats, came on to do a rewrite of Bong Joon-Ho's film Okja. And yes, I mean, I enjoyed this. I thought it was good fun, but I did think narratively it sets up this great concept with the multiples. And then it kind of gets sidetracked with this story about going off and fighting these kind of native woodlouse aliens that are tardigrades, I'd say. Yes, that are occupying this planet that they're trying to colonize / terraform. It almost seems to kind of forget its main premise at a certain point and just kind of focuses on this, you know, broadly unrelated sci-fi plot that doesn't actually need to have the clone element in there at all. It pains me to say it, but I did think that maybe this concept of multiple Mickeys dying would have been better suited for a TV show or like some kind of sitcom, really, because you can follow a different Mickey every week. And then maybe the multiple issue would be that's your season arc. You get towards the end, there's the multiple Mickeys, and there you go. But here it just seems like it's got this great premise that it sets up, and then it just kind of gets distracted with another plot. And you're just like, oh, okay. But obviously it's still saying a lot. It's it's a satire about capitalism and nation states invading other states. But yeah, it kind of seems to say everything it wants to do early on, and then wonders what to do with the rest of the film. And I don't know. I'm given the impression I didn't like it at all, but I did like it. I was just disappointed. What did you think, Nadine?
I didn't like it.
You didn't like it
No.
at all?
I think visually it's interesting. A lot of yellow and sort of blue, minty blue colours.
Yes.
I think I was really impressed with Robert Pattinson's performance.
Yeah, he is good. Yeah.
I think he's still one of his generation's greatest actors.
Yes.
Up there with Chalamet.
Yes.
But no, and he's an absolute whiz with accents. Like, apparently he based this accent on Steve Buscemi, I think.
Okay.
I don't know. That's what I've heard. I could be wrong. But yeah, so he's very much living the part. Visually, all the effects are really well done. When you look at, similar big budget films these days, sometimes the effects are really ropey and, it's all muddled and messy. And we don't get that with this film. So it looks good. It's got a good central performance. The premise is really good. Like you say, the promise of the premise. Oh, all this philosophical debate, what would it be like if you're printed? Is it still you if you're printed in another body? I feel like the weakness in this film is that it doesn't really engage with any of those philosophical debates very much. And I haven't read the book, but I've listened to passages from it, and it seems to be much more centered in the book. There's all this talk about the ship of Theseus and all of this type thing. So if you don't know, the ship of Theseus is this idea, I think it's an ancient Greek idea, that if a ship, if every part of the ship is replaced little by little, is it the same ship?
Triggers Brum.
Yeah, like triggers Brum.
Yeah.
Or like us human beings, every cell in our body changes at some point, dies and gets replaced.
Yep.
Are we the same? Well, we'd like to think we are. Is Mickey the same every time he gets his brain downloaded, or is he different? And I think maybe it's tried to make that more accessible, more fun, but it doesn't seem to be engaged with very much in the film. And I think that's when there's two of them, if he is himself, how can he exist? How can two of him exist? And have separate consciousness. So I think much more time seems to be spent on his love life.
Yeah.
And possible threesomes and other kind of ideas that don't really get explored either. But there's some love quadrangles, if you like. So
which leads to some odd moments, definitely.
That just seem weird. There's some weird moments that you're like, what was the point of that?
It's basically two female characters fighting over which clone they get to keep or whatever.
Yeah, and one of them is bisexual.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Something like that.
I don't really get it.
But and apparently in the book, Mickey 7 and Mickey 8 are nearly identical. So apparently that's a big change in the film, in that it gives Mickey 17 and Mickey 18 very different personalities. And I do wonder whether it maybe went too far with that difference, because they are and people are different from day to day, but this is they are so distinctly different characters that you do feel like, that's odd. That why is this one so different when all the others before had been kind of virtually the same?
I agree. It's one of those things. A lot of people have been saying it's great that he's been able to play basically the same character but so distinctly different. And there are a lot of action scenes and there's scenes with them both on screen, so they want to differentiate them so it's not confusing. But like I said, is it watering down that concept? I actually find it really annoying when actors play multiple roles and they make them too distinctly different. Twins or clones or whatever. One of them's got a limp, one of them's got an eye patch, one of them's got a funny accent. So I actually don't think that's great acting. I think the best example or one of the best examples of one actor playing two characters who are basically the same is The Double by Richard Ayoade, starring
Jesse Eisenberg.
And he does a fantastic job of playing these two characters who are different people but look exactly the same and have different personalities, but making the differences, I mean, you can tell them apart. They're definitely two distinctly different characters, but the differences are really subtle. One's more confident, one's more anxious, and it's not projected in this, like, you know, oh, he's got his hair like this and he's, you know, he's got a funny walk or whatever. So I wasn't as impressed with the two distinctly different Mickeys, because like you say, I think it's more interesting. It's more of a head scratcher if they're similar. It's like, well, who's the real Mickey?
Yeah, exactly. And it's weird because the film makes a point of differentiating between the two of them at one point by giving Mickey 18, I think it is, a scar on his face. And I was thinking, you don't really need to do that. They are distinct enough characters that you can tell. You don't need that visual aid to help you out.
They're wearing hats. One of them could have a slightly different hat or something. Do you know what I mean? There's so many ways. Yeah, it just feels like it's made it as simple and easy to follow as possible. Like, look, this is bad Mickey with the scar. But yeah, and the other performances, you know, I love Mark Ruffalo as much as anybody else. But I felt like he was really OTT in this. He was obviously doing a Trump impression, although Bong Joon-Ho has said it's an amalgamation of all sorts of leaders and nobody in particular.
I mean, come on.
But all his followers are wearing red MAGA-style hats. There's definitely a lot of Trump in there.
It's not subtle satire in that sense, is it?
But I feel like that could have been even more interesting, because that's a huge... Obviously, this film was made a couple of years ago. They didn't know where politics was going, but that's a huge thing right now. Trump is president again. And it feels like it could have been a really cutting satire. You know, it could have really gone for the jugular there. And I think it's maybe a bit silly. I don't know. Toni Collette seems wasted. We haven't mentioned Naomi Aki. She does a great job. I feel like the casting director must have been a fan of the end of the effing world, because Naomi Aki and Tim Key are both in that.
Right.
But yeah, Holiday Grange is in it for 5 minutes, and she seems like she's going to be an important character, and then she just kind of disappears.
So
I just think, you know, it might be worth a watch if you like Okja. Okja. And The Host, if that's the kind of Bong Joon-Ho you're into, then you might really enjoy this. But if you're more of a Parasite fan, it might not really hit the right notes for you. Yeah,
that's the thing. I think I was a little bit more up on it than you, but still, it just didn't quite.
I just was bored a lot of the time.
That's the thing. I wish it had just stuck to its premise a bit more and just kind of had because obviously it was delayed, and I do wonder whether a lot of that was problems with the third act, whether the studio were just like, no, you need to have this big action thing or whatever, and then because as I say, it just kind of turns into something else. But you know, it's a vaguely original sci-fi film, as in, you know, it's not a franchise or anything. So I'm glad it got made. I'm glad someone gave Bong some money and that this came out. So still go see it. Give it some money. It was disappointing.
It's I think coming off Parasite. You know, the biggest film of that year. The first international film to win Best Picture. You know, I mean, watching that film, I wouldn't say it's my favourite film, but watching it, I knew it was an instant classic. You're just like, oh, I'm going to remember this film in the future. This is like, you know, iconic.
But it does not feel like this film.
Mickey 17 didn't quite live up to that, but who could have lived up to that?
Exactly. So, you seen anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the film Santosh, directed by British India filmmaker Sandhya Suri. It's about a government scheme in India that sees newly widowed Santosh inherit her husband's job as a police constable in the rural badlands of northern India. So it's a really interesting premise. I've got to say, I've watched a few Indian films, but they tend to be the more Bollywood variety, the more heightened musical, kind of fantasy almost sort of depictions of India. So it's really interesting to see Santosh and also Imagine as Light, a film set in modern India, tackling modern issues by female directors. So I recommend both of those films. I don't know much about India. I've never been there. So I was really intrigued by the premise. I hadn't heard of this scheme, women inheriting their husbands' jobs. I think here in the UK, we probably have this idea that women are not celebrated in countries like India, that women have it much tougher. And I think it deals with some of those issues. But then we also see women succeed in some ways, but are they succeeding because they're taking on male culture and they're behaving like men in this police, in this police constabulary, I think is the word, isn't it? So we see a lot of, it's interesting, there's a lot of gender politics, and there's scenes where men are getting beat up by women with the encouragement of the police as a kind of, eye for an eye sort of tactic. And you're like, is that progressive? Is that a good thing? I think the main character of Santosh, who's played by Shahana Goswami, is a really intriguing character. You're often not really let into her personal world. She's often an observer. So you don't know what to make of her a lot of the time. Is she a good person? Is she morally just? Is she more grey? Is she reveling in the things that she sees? Because there's a lot of practices that go on that just are, let's say, not really very appropriate practices for police to be involved with. And there's without giving any spoilers, there's a lot of corruption and things like that happening in this police force, and a lot of sort of snobbery and sort of I don't know if it's to do with the caste system and sort of, or class, certain crimes not really being paid attention to because of the people, that are involved, that are affected by the crimes. There is a murder at some point that the police officer, the male police officers kind of dismiss out of hand. Santosh wants to write a report about it. I think it's really interesting how ambiguous her character is, and you never really know for quite a lot of the movie, which side is she on? Is she moral? Is she corrupt? On the negative side, I will say it's 128 minutes long. I don't feel like it needed to be that long. And when we get to the end, there's this climactic scene where she sort of has a face-off with her female mentor, if you like, at the police force. And there's a big sort of discussion between them. There's this beautiful shot. She's waiting at the train station and we see this train passing by this couple. But it sort of ends and you're like, oh, that's the end. I feel like I've seen this a lot in films lately where they don't seem to build to a satisfying climax. They just kind of peter out and then they end. And I had a similar feeling with this film, but I think it's beautifully shot. I thought the concept was really interesting. It was very well acted. It gets very dark at one point. So there's scenes of torture and violence, and that's might be off-putting for some people, but I think it's talking about something really interesting. Some Indian commentators have said that it paints India in a bad light, that it makes it look very backwards. I can't speak for that. Like I said, I've never been to India. I don't know if this is an accurate portrayal of policing in India, but it's certainly an engaging, interesting, dark story, and I would definitely recommend it. And it's out at cinemas soon. Please check it out. All We Imagine as Light as well is a great film. I'd recommend that if you want to see a different side of India. And both by female film directors and both BAFTA nominated. So worth checking out.
Well, thank you very much, Nadine. So that is it for the review section this week. But we've just got time for Nadine's roundup of local events.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, Screen B14 are teaming up with the Mockingbird and Tape Collective to show Leslie Harris's Just Another Girl on the IRT. This is on the 14th of April at 8 p.m. and it's a 4K restoration screening. This will be your last chance, I think, to see this film in the UK. It's playing at various venues around the country. But I really recommend seeing this on the big screen. It's a film from the 90s. It's got a lot of energy. It's really fun. Fleabag before Fleabag, I've been calling it. But yeah, like I said, Leslie Harris never made another movie. It's such a shame. Midland Shorts. So we'll be showing some short films by local filmmakers at the Cuban Embassy on the 17th of April. And there'll be 2 for 1 on selected cocktails. And we'll be trialling pay-as-you-feel tickets. So please don't think that you can't come because you can't afford it, because we have a complete sliding scale on how much you pay for the tickets. So hopefully there'll be no barriers to anyone coming to that great event. And I'm not programming it this year, so please don't send me your short films. Just thought I'd mention that. People keep asking me about it. All We Imagine as Light. I just mentioned that. This is what a brilliant segue. We'll be showing at Sturchley Open Cinema on the 28th of March at Sturchley Baths. So check out their socials, Sturchley Cinema. And if you want tickets to any of our events, that's at Screen B14. And Whatever Pays the Rent will be showing La Haine for 90-minute movie club at Hare and Hounds on the 23rd of April. And I think tickets are £5, so definitely worth checking out that cinematic classic.
Thanks, Nadine. Some exciting stuff coming up, as always. That's it. That's all we've got time for this week. Do be sure to join us next time on the Brum Picture Show. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from me, Paul.
It's goodbye from me, Nadine.
That's it. Goodbye.
You have been listening to The Brum Picture Show, a Screen B14 production for Brum Radio. Tune in next time for more film fun, and don't forget to email us at pictureshow@brumradio.com. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
On this week's show, we're celebrating International Women's Month. Yes, that's right. International Women's Day wasn't enough, so they've taken over the entire month of March, the ladies. So yeah.
I think it's Women's History Month, technically. Or is it also International Women's Month?
Apparently it's International Women's Month.
Okay.
I better double check now. Oh,
it's all right.
maybe. Women's History Month.
The woman was right.
That means my whole joke doesn't work. Okay.
Wow. Whose fault is that?
Mine.
Okay.
Okay, let's start again. Hello and welcome to the Brum Picture Show.
Thank you for listening to this Brum Radio podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us on your podcast app.